Hi, I'm Keith and I'm going to show you how to change the engine oil and oil filter on a John Deere 17G.
Visit FortisHD.com to order every part you need for your John Deere 17G. You'll need an aftermarket Baldwin B1400 engine oil filter, which is the equivalent to an OEM John Deere M806418. You'll also need 3.1 liters of engine oil. Also, make sure you're using the proper oil for your area, mainly you cold weather guys. If you're not sure, refer to your 17G owner's manual. We also have a reference guide at FortisHD.com for equivalent oils.
The first thing that we got to do is we set it up so that the drain is going to be above the back side of the tracks, not the front where the blade is, so you can actually access underneath it. And before I dump the engine oil, I usually like to check the level of it. Is it low? Is it high? It lets me know if we have engine oil leaks that we should be looking for. The color of it, is it really black or clean? This engine oil in this machine is fairly clean. It's right about due for a service and I don't see anything wrong with it. It's a little bit low from the top mark, but we're well above halfway between the lower mark and the upper mark. So I don't believe there's any significant leaks or anything like that. I will keep an eye out for any leaks, anything like that, as I do the service, just in case we notice anything not normal. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to drain the engine oil. Have a drain pan, something to catch the oil underneath. On this machine, it's a 17mm socket. I usually put the plug on the edge, a little bit of oil drains out.
We highly recommend you sample the engine oil. For a video on how to do that and how to properly read the results, check the link below.
Now on these machines, this machine uses a Yanmar engine. So I usually lift the dipstick just a little bit to let the crankcase vent out, lets air get in, and the engine oil will drain a little bit faster. Now before the video, I did fire the machine up and let it run for a little bit. You do want to do this when the engine is warm, get those contaminants mixed in with the oil so they come out with the used oil. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the engine oil filter. There's a couple different tools you can use for this. It's a little bit tough to get a strap wrench in here, so we won't be using that. I do have a small filter wrench here, which will grab onto the filter. You can twist it off with that. If you don't have one of those, you can use a pair of channel locks to get in there, grab onto that filter and crack it loose. Now that it's loose, you can just pull it out by hand. Some oil will drain out where the oil filter is screwed on. Make sure your drain pan is still there. It'll catch any oil. I typically use a mesh screen, put it above my drain pan or a bucket, just to flip the oil filter upside down and let it drain so it can be disposed of correctly. If you buy your filters at the dealership, most likely you can check the part number on the side of it. It's the same. If you got an aftermarket filter, the part numbers won't match, but you can take a look at it. You can check the seal is the same size, the threaded hole is the same size. When installing an engine oil filter, you want to make sure the seal is lubricated. You can use a little bit of thin film of grease. You can use some oil. Some people use a little bit of the used engine oil that's dripping out. I prefer to use fresh new oil. This is gear oil, anything just to give it a little bit of lubrication for installation. Roll it around, you can see it's oil all the way around the whole seal. I also like to wipe a little bit of the old oil off where the old filter was sitting, just in case a little bit of dirt fell down. Make sure it's nice and clean seal surface. Now that we have that cleaned, we can install the filter. Do not use any tools to install this. You want to just make it as tight as possible by hand. I like to give it a wipe. It's nice and clean. New engine oil filter. Next, we need to put the engine oil plug back in. I like to wipe it off, make sure it's clean. Have a look at the seal surface, make sure it's clean. There's no sand, grit, or dirt on it from the bottom of the engine. Thread it in by hand, tighten it up a little bit. I like to give it a wipe off so there's no residual oil, and you can tell later on down the road, tomorrow, any other day, that if it is leaking and you know that you wiped it off. Next, we're going to fill up the engine oil. On these smaller machines, it's a little bit difficult. The hood becomes in your way, the air filter becomes in your way. This right here is the engine oil fill. Now, because it's on an angle, if you have 1 liter containers, it's pretty easy to use 1 liter containers to put it in there. If you're going to use a funnel, the funnel is difficult. I like to use a pour jug myself. I use this quite a bit, so I always make sure that the inside is clean. We're going to use 1540 in this machine. Now, depending on the climate you're in, your temperature range, you might want to check if you're in really hot climates, 1540 might be a little bit too thin. Cold climates, 1540 may be too thick. You may need to drop down to a 030 or something like that, but check your climate range and what type of oil works best in your climate. All you do now is you pour the oil in, get it filled up, check your dipstick as you go so you don't overfill it. This takes a few minutes, just so you know. If you use a pour jug like this, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get in here. You can remove the cap of the air filter and remove the air filters out of your way. It'll give you a little bit more clearance above the hole to be able to use a funnel or a pour jug like I am. As we fill, we keep checking the dipstick. As you can see, I'm already on the dipstick, very close to full. So we're going to top it up just a little bit more. I'll double check it. Need a little bit more. Takes a few seconds for the cold oil to stream down through the gears to get into the bottom to get an accurate reading. The oil is tough to see, but I'm right on the top line right now. Now I know that the engine oil filter is not full, but what I like to do is get it close to the top line, and then I'll start the machine, let the machine pump oil through it, fill up the engine oil filter, that sort of thing, and then we'll shut it down, let the oil drain back down to the bottom, recheck our oil and top it up if necessary. To do that, you want to make sure you put your fill cap back on, or oil will start to come out while the engine's running. Make sure your dipstick is in, and in this case we're going to make sure the air filters are in because you don't want to run a machine with no air filters. Now that we're closed up, we'll start the machine. You only need to let it run for 5 seconds, 10 seconds at the absolute most, and all the oil will be filled in the oil filter and the engine will have oil all through it. And we'll shut the machine off. We'll give it 5 or 10 seconds, let the oil drain back down to the bottom to get an accurate reading. Now the engine oil is drained all the way down to the bottom, we can check it. Always pull the dipstick, give it a wipe off, because when it's running it splashes oil everywhere. And as you can see, I'm a little bit lower than the top line, so we do have to top it up. That little bit of oil went into the oil filter, went into the rest of the engine to lubricate it up, and it's staying up in the head and into the components. As you can see, I've got it topped up right at the top line. It's a little bit higher on the bottom because when you put it in the engine, it's on an angle, and that makes it level. I like to see it right at that top line, so as you're operating your machine and you're putting hours on it and you check your oil, you know if you have a leak or if the engine is burning oil, if it's starting to go down slightly. And that's how you do an engine oil and oil filter change on a John Deere 17G.
If you don't have time to do the service yourself, or you want to get on a preventative maintenance program, reach out to TekamoHD.com and they can set you up with a heavy-duty mechanic in your area.